Tonight, you're going to fall asleep like you've done 1,000 times before. Your eyes will close, your breathing will slow, your body will sink into the mattress, and then, maybe, you'll wake up, not fully, not safely. Your eyes will open, but something will be wrong, because you'll realize you can't move, not your arms, not your legs, not even your voice. You'll try to call for help and nothing will come out. And then you'll feel it, a weight on your chest, a presence in the room, something watching you from the dark like it's been waiting. For centuries, people had a name for this. They didn't call it anxiety. They didn't call it a sleep disorder. They called it the Night Hag. And if you've never experienced her, you probably think the explanation is simple. A nightmare, a superstition, an overactive imagination. But that's not quite right, because the Night Hag is one of those rare human stories where folklore and biology lock together perfectly, like two halves of the same key. And once you understand what's actually happening in your brain during those moments, you'll never think about nightmares the same way again. Here's the strange part. Across countries, languages, and centuries, people who've never met each other describe the same thing: waking up paralyzed, sensing a presence, seeing a shadow figure, feeling pressure on the chest, and believing with absolute certainty that they are about to die. That consistency is why the Night Hag survived as a legend, not because it's a good story, but because it's an experience that repeats itself in human bodies everywhere. In Newfoundland and parts of the Caribbean, it's the Old Hag. In Japan, it's Kanashibari, being bound by metal. In Brazil, it's Pisadeira, an old woman who steps on your chest at night. In parts of Scandinavia, the old word mare described a spirit that sat on sleepers. And that word, mare, is where we get the word nightmare. Not a bad dream, a nightmare, a thing that comes to you. So what is it? Is it a real entity? Or is it the oldest misunderstanding in human history, caused by a feature of the brain that we were never meant to notice? To answer that, you have to understand what your body is doing when it sleeps, and more importantly, what it does when it malfunctions. Every night, when you enter REM sleep, the phase where vivid dreaming is most common, your brain does something drastic. It shuts down your muscles. This is called REM atonia. It's a safety mechanism, because if your dreams feel real enough, your body might try to act them out. So the brain flips a switch. Dream as hard as you want, but stay still. Most of the time, that switch is perfectly timed. You fall into REM, you're paralyzed, you dream, you wake up, the paralysis shuts off. Clean, invisible, elegant. But sometimes, you wake up before the paralysis ends. That is sleep paralysis, and it's more common than most people realize. A widely cited 2011 review, Sharpless and Barber, estimated around 8% of people experience sleep paralysis at least once, with higher rates in students and psychiatric populations, meaning millions of people have met the Night Hag. They just didn't call her that. But sleep paralysis alone doesn't explain the worst part: the fear, the presence, the hallucinations that feel more real than waking life. So why does your brain add a monster? During sleep paralysis, your body is trapped between states. Part of your brain is awake enough to perceive the room, but part of your brain is still dreaming. That overlap is where reality starts to leak. Researchers who study sleep paralysis often describe 3 common types of hallucinations. 1, the intruder, the sense that something is in the room. 2, the incubus, pressure on the chest, suffocation, being pinned down. 3, vestibular motor effects, floating, falling, out-of-body sensations. One influential researcher, J. Allen Chaney, documented these patterns in the late 1990s and early 2000s through large surveys of experiences. And the order matters. First, the presence, then the fear. Then your brain tries to explain the fear. Because fear is not optional. Fear is a command. Your amygdala, your brain's threat detector, doesn't like ambiguity. If you feel terror, it demands an object to attach it to. So, in that half-dreaming state, your brain does what it always does. It generates a story that fits the emotion. Something is here. Something is on me. Something is doing this. And because you can't move, your mind doesn't interpret it as sleep chemistry. It interprets it as predation. That's the ancient logic. If you are awake and paralyzed, you are not safe. People often describe the night hag the same way. A crushing weight, a pressure on the ribs, a sense of choking. And there's a physiological reason that part feels so convincing. In REM sleep, your breathing changes. It becomes shallower and more irregular. At the same time, many of your accessory breathing muscles are inhibited along with the rest of your body. So if you wake up into paralysis, you may become aware of breathing that feels restricted, especially if you're lying on your back. Then panic kicks in. Panic makes you breathe harder, but your body won't cooperate. So your brain reaches for the simplest explanation. Something is sitting on my chest. That's the incubus. That's Pisadera. That's the night hag. Not because cultures copied each other, but because human anatomy is the same everywhere. There's another detail that shows up again and again. The figure is often dark, faceless, a silhouette. That's not random either. In low light, your vision loses detail fast. Your brain starts filling gaps aggressively. Edges become meaning. Movement becomes danger. And during sleep paralysis, you're in a heightened threat state, scanning for an enemy you can't fight. So the brain chooses the cheapest possible visual, a shape, a human-like outline, enough to trigger every survival alarm you have, without needing high-definition detail. This is also why so many people describe the same types of entities: shadow men, witches, demons, aliens, different cultural skins, same neurological core. It's tempting to look back and think, how could anyone believe a witch sat on their chest? But imagine living before sleep science, before electric light, before mental health vocabulary. You wake up paralyzed. You can't scream. You feel a presence. You can't breathe properly. You're certain you're dying. Then it passes. What would you call that? A supernatural attack is not a childish explanation. It's a human one. It's what you get when a real biological event happens. And the only available language is myth. The night hag is what your nervous system feels like from the inside when it glitches. And that's why the story lasted. Because the experience is real. Only the interpretation changes. First, remember what it is. Sleep paralysis is terrifying, but it is usually harmless on its own. It often shows up with stress, sleep deprivation, irregular schedules, sleeping on the back, and conditions like narcolepsy. Second, reduce the fuel. Keep a consistent sleep schedule. Limit sleep deprivation. Manage stress. Consider side sleeping if you notice it happens on your back. Third, if it happens in the moment, don't try to fight your whole body. Many people report it's easier to focus on small movements. Wiggling a finger, moving the tongue, shifting the eyes, anything that helps the brain complete the transition out of REM atonia. And if it's frequent or paired with extreme daytime sleepiness, it's worth discussing with a clinician, because sometimes sleep paralysis is part of a bigger sleep disorder picture. Here's the part that changes how you see the Night Hag. She isn't a creature that visits you. She's a boundary you weren't meant to notice, the seam between dreaming and waking. For most of human history, people met that seam in dark rooms, in silent nights, with no explanation except fear. They didn't invent the hag because they loved horror stories. They invented her because they needed a name for the moment when your mind is awake and your body is still asleep. So if it happens to you one night, if you open your eyes and feel the room turn hostile, try to remember this. The presence is your brain searching for an enemy. The weight is your breath colliding with paralysis. The terror is an ancient alarm ringing in an empty hallway. And the Night Hag. The Night Hag is what it feels like to catch your own biology in the act. You will move again. You will breathe normally again, and the room will become just a room. But for a few seconds, you'll understand why entire civilizations believed the dark could climb onto your chest, and why the word nightmare once meant something that didn't live in your dreams but walked into your bedroom.